Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Young Leaders panel. We're happy to have you all here with us tonight. My name is Brianna Gower, and I am the director of the Young Leaders and Advocates Network. For those of you who aren't familiar, YLAN is a statewide network run for and by young people with disabilities. We're a part of Western New York Independent Living. And as a network, we're dedicated to uniting and empowering young people across the state and ensuring that young people are authentically and meaningfully involved in all decisions that affect us. I myself, growing up as a young person with a disability, find myself struggling a lot to find that sense of community and pride in myself. I often felt isolated and alone, and it really wasn't until I got into this type of work, this type of community, that I realized that disability was something I could be proud of. It was something I could be able to find peers within, see myself in others, and something that I could find passion with through this work. So I'm really excited to be here introducing this event. You're going to be hearing from some other experienced young leaders with disabilities, sharing their journeys to speak out and take action. And thank you.
All right. Welcome once again, everyone, to the Young Leaders and Advocates Network Young Leaders panel in celebration of Disability History Pride. Grateful for you to be joining us this evening, and if you wouldn't mind, if you would, hit the share button as you're tuning in, so others can perhaps join us as well. Before we get into it, I just wanted to give a quick little bit of a history on disability pride. Disability pride is the idea that people with disabilities should be proud of their disabled identities. People with disabilities are the largest and most diverse minority within the population, and we represent all abilities, ages, races, as you'll be able to see from our panel, ethnicities, religions, socioeconomic backgrounds, and more. Disability pride focuses on the social model of disability as well. The disability community views the social model as a more positive than the medical model, which often is used to subdue or to place the individual with a disability in a less empowered role. The first Disability Pride Day was held in Boston, Massachusetts in 1990, which coincides with the same year the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law, creating a new era of change for the disability community. The United States' first Disability Pride Parade was held in Chicago in 2004. And today, Disability Pride Parades have been held in a number of places across the United States, including Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County. We already mentioned Chicago, Philadelphia, Colorado Springs, Houston, Atlanta, Detroit, New Jersey, New York City, and Winnell's home city of I almost said Boston, Buffalo, Buffalo, New York. It's also spread even internationally to such locations as Norway and the United Kingdom as well. The events that have been put on throughout this week from Western New York Independent Living, or WINL for short, have dealt with disability pride, not only in celebration of the month, but also because many disabled people, including young people, are exposed on a regular basis to ableism. Ableism is present throughout society and can take the form of condescending, rude, or abusive attitudes towards people with disabilities, leading to a lack of accessible and inclusive services and communities. A very common form of ableism occurs within the medical model and charity paradigms of disability. They often define the problem of people with disabilities as lacking vocational skills, education, socioeconomic status, and even political and cultural skills. They believe that we're broken and we're sick and we need to be fixed or cured in order to fit within society. It objectifies in one group of people for the benefit of another group of people, such as using people with disabilities to inspire you or to motivate you or to make you think, well, however bad my life is, at least, it could always be worse. I could be that person. And they're often seen as clients or patients or recipients of charities and non-existent socially. But as we talk about disability pride, understand that it is a tool to fight against ableism by affirming one's self-worth as a person with a disability in an ableist society. The social model of disability, as well as the independent living and disability pride paradigms, believes that society is the issue. The hostile attitudes and environments are such due to the lack of legal protections and recognition of the inherent worth of people with disabilities. Society is the issue, not people with disabilities. We believe in advocacy, barrier removals, peer role models and leaders, self-help and consumer control over options of services, meaning people with disabilities are in the driver's seats because we should be, or in other words, nothing about us without us. The goal is independence through control over acceptable options for living in an integrated community of choice. Pride in our unique talents and attributes of each individual and a positive disability identity. So with that, we have a video that we want to share from the chair of our Young Leaders and Advocates Network Council, who couldn't be with us tonight, but wanted to share a couple of words. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our video. Jillian, do you have the video? Seems like there's something wrong with the audio. We can't seem to hear it, so give us just one moment, folks. All right. I'm not sure if we're just having a little bit. I'm still having a little bit of an issue with the sound. So unfortunately, we might not be able to share that with you. But to give the gist, Blaze Bryant is the chair of our Young Leaders and Advocates Network, and he was unable to join us this evening as he's on vacation, taking some much needed time off in Maine. But he basically wanted to share that he had first gotten involved in advocacy as in his 20s because he realized just about how much disability injustice there was. Oh, we got it. Okay. I'm just being told that we got it, so I don't need to place my words in Blaze's mouth. We'll be able to share that with you now.
Hi, I'm Blaze Bryant. I'm the chair of the Young Leaders and Advocates Network Council. Thank you so much for joining us at this year's virtual event on Disability Pride hosted by the Western New York Independent Living. I'm sorry that I can't be there to share the virtual space with you as I am away on vacation and taping this ahead of time. I decided to get involved in the youth movement in my early 20s when I really and truly realized how much disability injustice there was after I graduated college. Because the simple reality is, and it was then too, that I can be the change that I want to be, which was why I wanted to get involved. And I want you to remember that too as we celebrate disability pride and what it means to be proud of our identities as people with disabilities, is that we can be the change that we want to be, and we can make the change that we want to make. That change has to start from somewhere, oftentimes one person. That could very well be you. So I don't want to take up much more of your time. I hope you have a great event, and please consider getting involved and learning more about the Young Leaders and Advocates Network and getting involved in disability rights as a whole. Because don't you want to be the change that you want to see and help make the change that you want to make? Because the simple reality is nothing about us without us.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Blaze. Bear with me in just one moment here. Just wanted to share this couple of slides with you. As Blaze had mentioned, there's various ways to get involved with the Young Leaders and Advocates Network, which was created by and for young people with disabilities and run by the same. As Blaze kind of alluded to, we're in this together. And the main way to get involved is to become a member. As a member, you decide what that means to you. Members have the opportunity to participate in leadership and advocacy activities. They can receive our news and different updates. And depending on how active you are, you also have the ability to build your skills, your resume, partner with peers across the state, and bring youth voice. So if you're a young person between the ages of 14 and 30 with disabilities or experiences in systems such as special education, mental health, foster care, juvenile justice, and addiction recovery, you're eligible to join, and you can do so by going to our website. You can see that, you should be able to see that scrolling across the bottom of our stream, www.YLAN, YLA network, ny.org. And you could click under the Get Involved tab, and there's a Word or PDF form that also can be available by request. And as a member, you have the ability to join one of 3 statewide committees, which is dedicated to growing and supporting the movement that we find ourselves in. These groups can meet virtually each month, depending on the schedules of the members. Our advocacy group, they lead our advocacy campaigns and ensure our voices are heard. And they also create opportunities for young people to also create change. Our our network events committee leads the planning of our network's events, such as our statewide summit and other different activities that we might have throughout the year, such as like a speak out or really whatever our members can think of and want to host. And finally, our engagement committee creates ways to grow our network and strengthen our voices. And they do that through different promotional materials, media, and news. And finally, Blaze had shared that he is the current chair of our Young Leaders and Advocates Network Council. They oversee and guide all of our network activities. They work to build stronger youth movements in our state and build voices and bring our voices, to government, policy, and programs. And this work really ensures that there's truly nothing about us without us. And additionally, while serving on the council, you have the opportunity to gain and grow skills, make a lot of different connections, and have a great addition to your resume So we're currently looking for some motivated young persons, ages 18 to 30 who self-identify as having a disability to join our council. And if that's you, you can reach out to us as well through our website. You can email info@ylanetworkny.org. Give me a second just to unshare my screen here. Okay, now, without further ado, I want to introduce our panel for this evening. Our first panelist that is joining us is Mika Gonzalez, and Mika has used her lived experience as a peer to provide training and technical assistance to youth serving agencies and youth peer advocates in 20 counties of central New York area. She served on numerous boards, including the Regional Interagency Technical Assistance Team as both a member and the chair. And she also has served on the policy committee to minimize barriers to those eligible and those who are currently receiving services from Access VR. She's recently graduated with a bachelor's in social work from Syracuse University, and is currently the coordinator of the Central Region Addiction Resource Center, which covers Madison, Cortland, and Onondaga, Cayuga, and Oswego counties. Our second panelist this evening is our council chair-elect, Melanie Hecker. Melanie is a 27-year-old autistic woman from Albany, New York, who has been a lifelong disability advocate. She has experience in the mental health disability, developmental disability, and special education and independent living systems. She's interned at the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley, Disability Rights New York, and the New York State Council on Children and Families. And currently, she's working as a research training assistant at the Center for START Services. Melanie possesses extensive committee experiences. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about them, but I only have so much time to introduce someone. So in addition to all those different committee experiences and numerous accolades, Melanie has recently graduated with her master's degree in public administration from the Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy at the University at Albany. And our third panelist joining us for this evening is Katrina Hazel, or she goes by Trina. Trina is the former Miss Wheelchair New York of 2008, and she resides in Brooklyn, New York. Her platform is to bring self-advocacy into schools and make them more inclusive. A strong self-advocate, motivational speaker, blogger, and college student. Trina has graduated from the Partners in Policymaking in 2014, is the founder of her own advocacy group, Voices of Power, as well as the newly formed Disability Champion Mentoring Network. She's affiliated with many disability-related organizations and serves on many disability-related councils, and currently serves on the Regional Center for Workforce Transformation, as the self-advocacy lead for Region 4 in New York City. So we are bringing in people from all across the state. I'm so glad each of you are here this evening. Thank you all for joining us. Just to start with our questions, and you can go in whichever order you would like, whether we start in Central New York or New York City or Albany, New York, what have you. I want to ask, what does disability pride? Well, let me back up first also. For those of you who are joining us also, we're going to be taking questions as well. So if you have questions throughout the event, please, you can write them in the comment section of however you're viewing, and we should be able to see them as well pop up on our screen, which we will try to address all of them in the second portion of our event. But yes, the first question that I want to ask you, perhaps let's start with Mika. What does disability pride mean to you?
Hi, everyone. I I was thinking about this question earlier, and because it means different things to so many different people, I kind of found myself having a little bit of difficulty trying to sum up what I feel and think what it looks like. So if I think about disability pride as a whole, I kind of, the image that pops up in my head is those advocacy pictures that you see online, people with signs up at the Capitol, things of that nature. And I think it's important to know that, especially for people who would like to get involved, that we all have a place in what pride looks like. So in terms of advocacy, maybe your thing isn't necessarily holding a sign and going up and lobbying. Maybe you want to plan. Maybe you want to support. That's where YLAN comes in, that you have those opportunities. But for me personally, it's a personal journey to kind of get there and be proud of my identities and celebrate the fact that myself and my disabilities make me quote unquote different. And it took kind of a little bit of soul searching for me to kind of really feel solid and understand and conceptualize the fact that not everybody thinks the way that I do, which is a beautiful thing. And so it sounds cliche, but it really was a journey of finding my comfortability, knowing my strengths, totally understanding my weaknesses. That's a really uncomfortable position sometimes to be in, and it's not fun. But I have found a lot of power and a lot of clarity when I sit with that piece of, okay, what are the things that I'm struggling with? What are the things that I continue to struggle with? And how can I fix that? And maybe inadvertently, some could say that is how my pride has come about, how I've become more secure in who I am, and quite frankly, unapologetic for my identities, because there's no reason to feel ashamed or feel any of those things. Quite honestly, I really do. I attribute a decent chunk of that pride to working with Brianna and Elijah and Melanie and so many other people that are here, because it just helped normalize that we each have different tools to come at the table and sit at the table. And I love that we can sit and just celebrate differences, but also not feel so alone. I always say that hope is something that's awesome to have, but it's really hard to gain once you've had it and you don't have it anymore. So in a nutshell, that's what it means to me. But there is power in kind of sitting in those darker areas and kind of understanding how we can turn those weaknesses, as some might call, into positives or strengths.
Perfect. Melanie or Trina, do you have anything else to add or share?
Yes. So I would say that what disability pride means to me is rejecting the idea that disabilities are something negative or bad or harmful or a deficit, and embracing the idea that disability is a part of diversity, just like any other part of diversity. And when you think back to when you were in kindergarten and your teacher was teaching you about people like Martin Luther King Jr. or Harvey Milk, and talking about how boring the world would be if everybody was just the same. And very often, people with disabilities aren't included in those kinds of conversations. But disability pride means ensuring that we are. Ensuring that disability is seen as something beautiful, because it's seen as not a deficit, but a difference. And it's seen as something that makes our world more colorful and vibrant. And the more people think like this, the more willing people will be to make our society more accessible and accepting.
Very strong words there. Yeah, absolutely. The world would be pretty boring, huh? Thank you for bringing us back to kindergarten, Melanie. Um, is there anything that you wanted to share for that, Trina?
Sure, I'll share. So for me, disability pride means many things, and as Mika said, it can mean different things for everyone, but it also allows people to like question what is normal and really like what is normal. So, to me, disability pride means being ambitious, being a voice and an advocate. It means opportunities, and it also means a way to help reshape disability in a positive way and help reduce stigma. It's a way to seek community inclusion, and it empowers me and makes me proud and enlightened by limitless dreams and goals that I have carrying with me. And it means celebrate you and how far you have come and how far we have to go as a community.
Yeah, absolutely. We have certainly come quite a ways. There's always um, further to go, and as Blaze had mentioned in his message, that's what got him involved and interested. And I think each of you all know, as advocates in your own rights, there's definitely a lot more work to do. And that we as young people are the generation to do it. We don't need to wait for someone else to come along, but we can be empowered as well to make those changes. So Melanie, you had mentioned about, I mean, really just took us back to kindergarten. So if I can maybe bring us back to a time when perhaps we were younger, when you were younger and maybe perhaps you were learning more about your disability, or maybe you were kind of uncomfortable in yourself. What I really want to ask is, kind of what helped you to develop that pride? Like, why is it important for young people with disabilities who aren't necessarily where you are yet in your journeys to feel pride?
And yes, a lot of this will be answered in the next question. So I'm going to hold off just a tiny bit on the full detail, but I started my advocacy journey when I was 15 years old, where on a complete fluke, I discovered that I had this amazing natural talent for public speaking. Only about 20% of autistic people have a savant skill. And I spent the first 15 years of my life not realizing that I had one until the directors of my autism recreation group randomly picked me out of the group to speak to a group of college students. But the messaging that I started out with was very different from the messaging that I'm using today. My initial few talks when I was in high school focused more on how autistic people can pretend to be normal or appear more normal. And the reason why I focused on that sort of messaging was because I had it drilled into me all of my life that autism was something bad or negative, and that I had to pretend to be another person in order to make it in this world, in order for people to love me, in order to work, go to school. But my messaging changed when I discovered the social model of disability. And I instead focused my energy on not autistic people or disabled people having to change, but about the world changing for us. And I would say that my previous messaging was very negative, because for people with invisible disabilities, trying to pretend to be normal takes away all of our life energy. If we spend all of our lives just trying to pretend we aren't disabled, we have no emotional or intellectual energy for anything else. And for people with visible disabilities, well, that strategy obviously does not work for people with visible disabilities. So disability pride is important in advocacy because it is a needed element in order to do the type of advocacy that people with disabilities really need, instead of the type of advocacy that would just make non-disabled people more comfortable around us.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I've heard about people with autism feeling like they need to mask who they are. You know, as you kind of said, like how your first talks dealt with talking to people with autism, how they can kind of fit in a little bit better rather than just being themselves. And you know, personally, I've had the opportunity to know Melanie for quite some time, and I'm glad that you have never shied away from who you are with me in my presence, because you are truly. She might have been a little bit modest, folks, with talking about you know, having an ability with public speak. Excuse me, public speak. She is truly a powerhouse. So if you ever have the opportunity to attend a conference or you see Melanie Hecker's name, definitely go check that out. You will be enlightened, and it's certainly a treat. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Melanie. Do either Trina or Mika, you have anything that you would like to add? Not at this moment.
I'll add something.
Okay.
I was gonna add that when I was younger, I was very shy, and I didn't speak to anyone besides like my mom, dad, and siblings. And so, I think that it's important for young people with disabilities to find pride because it would also help them find their voice in whatever way works for them. Because when I was younger, I liked to write letters and do many things in writing, but I didn't know that I would take my writing abilities to a whole new level and help make a difference. Until when I was 14 years old, I started my very own website to share my story with the world, and um, something so small just took off so big, and it never stops from there.
Yeah. Making sure I wasn't on mute. Yeah, absolutely. I think I can identify with that as well. That finding that pride help, helps you to find your voice. For sure. I know that I'm definitely for those of you who don't know, I too have a disability. And yeah, I think I am definitely much more vocal than I was when I was younger, which might be surprising because I'm still a pretty quiet individual. Mika, I saw you come off mute. I don't know if you had something to say, if you want me to ask the next question and start with you.
The next question is fine.
Okay, excellent. So our next question is how did you first get involved in advocacy and become proud of your identity?
Oh, that's a doozy of a question. But so for me, growing up, my early teenage years, actually all of my teenage years, I struggled immensely with my mental health, with other disabilities too, but that was probably the biggest chunk of my life and the thing that I couldn't not focus on because, quite frankly, if it makes sense, it was a demanding part of my life. And I remember just feeling so alone. I remember feeling extremely shameful of the fact that I had to go to alternative school because I couldn't be in a traditional school setting. I was extremely embarrassed that, I couldn't, what society tells you, like, oh, you're crazy, oh, you're this, oh, you're that. And having to be hospitalized for psychiatric care. Those are some heavy things, especially if like 13, 14, those primitive years that you really are starting to find yourself as a person. And I just remember feeling so alone. I've always kind of, like, in an empowered way, have kind of always felt like an outcast. But again, it's an empowered way because I'm somebody who is very observant. That's how I kind of orient myself and really get a feel for things. I kind of sit back a little bit and then I, assess the scene, or however you want to put it, and then I kind of position myself so I really understand things. And I just remember feeling so alone and so helpless and so much shame, and it actually made things worse by a landslide. It just made them so bad. And so I vowed, after a traumatic event in my life happened, that I kind of had a pep talk with myself, and I was like, okay, listen, you gotta get your stuff together. You're a very smart person. You're a very creative person. And so how can we fix this to the best of the ability that I have? Because I can only go through so much therapy and so much this and so much that. Although there's a ton of work that I can do for myself. Self-care being one of the biggest ones. I've learned that I'm somebody who needs a fidget toy all the time, or a crossword puzzle book, or something like that. And I always felt like outcasted because of that. Now I'm just like, hey, it works for me. Anyway, so I didn't realize that my experience throughout those journeys was kind of like, I had people in my life that work with me through service coordinators and other things like that, that they saw something in me that I didn't see myself. So I thought that everybody, did X, Y, and Z. And I remember I had somebody who was a service coordinator that worked with me, and she just got me. Like, she just understood me. I didn't have to say anything. Like, she just, like, I look forward to seeing her. And one day she said, oh, there's an art show. You should really do it. You should really get involved. You like painting, you like photography. And I was like, whatever, I'm not doing this stuff, right? No. And long story short, I submitted 2 of my photographs, and I won first place. And it kind of clicked with me. I was like, wait a minute. And so I started seeing less of my negatives and more of my strengths. And because of somebody listening to me, just letting me just vent, it didn't matter. Like, she just sat there and she didn't really say anything back. She just let me vent, that I understood that, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world to be alone, because then the change can start with me and I can inspire others. I'm not up here sitting on my high horse or anything, but there's so much power in changing the conversation and the dialogue that society has written for us already, and then us coming in and saying, no, not really. No, that's one person's story. That's not everybody's story. And for me, mental health is so deeply rooted in all of my trauma that there's very much so varying perspectives and therapies and techniques that are like, some of them are still derivative from asylums and other things like that, like very old school kind of practices, if you will. And I don't like any of those. I don't like most of them. And so that's also where I found my voice. I really like writing and speaking. So that's how I really became proud of myself and kind of owned it, that I like to go about things a little bit differently. I'm a creative person. I'm an adventurous person. And so I gave myself that space, and it just kind of naturally happened from there, just getting involved. And again, advocacy looks different for everybody. I'm not necessarily the person that will be holding the signs up at the Capitol building, but I will sit with you and help propose policies, or be on a committee, or on the board for YLAN kind of thing. That's where I see myself the most meaningful, like, participant, is in those spaces.
Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioning, society quite a bit, again, comes back to kind of the, the medical and charity models versus the social model of, hey,
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with us. We are just, how did you put it, Melanie? You said that's just a,
Just the difference.
yeah, just another difference.
As-
that
Yes.
Go ahead, Melanie.
As for my story, which I alluded to earlier, so I talk about my disability organizations a lot when we're talking about organizational culture at school. And one day, my professor asked the class, is it possible for somebody to turn into a different person overnight? And my answer to that was yes, because I have. And here's how. So I talked about the way that I used to be and what my messaging was centered around. And when I was 18 years old in my first year of college, I was working with a school to work transition counselor. I had been doing well at my volunteer job, and she was trying to help me find a pay job. And we were having very little luck initially because I didn't really know who I was or what I wanted. At the end of one job hunting session, she gave me an application for a statewide youth leadership forum and encouraged me to apply. And I did, and I got accepted. And what I saw and heard at that very first event changed my life and my perspective and changed it permanently. At that statewide youth leadership forum event, I was told for the first time by Stephanie Orlando and Aaron Beyer and other leaders in the field that there was nothing wrong with me. What's wrong is with society. And that I don't need to change who I am. What I need to change is the world around me. And furthermore, they told me how I can change the world around me through policy and advocacy and encouraging other young people to adopt my mindsets. And it was there that I became a completely different person overnight. Before I discovered this, I spent my entire time being anxious, jealous, resentful, feeling like I needed to be like other people and that I was inferior to other people. But I came out of that event a strong, confident person, sure in who I was and proud of who I was. Now, I very often, when I talk about this, will invoke Beverly Tatum's stages of identity development that she introduced in her book, Why Are All of the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And these stages were designed for racial identity development, but are very applicable to disability identity development. In the pre-encounter stage in this framework, somebody tries to downplay their identity and feels like it won't play that much of a factor in their life or in their achievement. But then they have an encounter, like my statewide youth leadership forum, that changes how they see their identity and increases the importance of their identity. From there, I went into the immersion stage. I was hired as a systems advocate. It was my very first job. And I spent nearly all of my time at work. If I wasn't working at my pay job, I was volunteering either for the organization or for various other organizations and work groups. And I just wanted to spend all of my time being immersed and learning more about this culture that I had just discovered, that I identified with so much. Eventually, I did need to stop working in order to go to school full-time, and I entered something called the internalization stage, where I had a healthier understanding of my identity and how my identity relates to other identities in the world at large. And so that's really how I got involved in advocacy.
Thank you for sharing that all, Melanie. Yeah, absolutely. You get to that point of enlightenment where it's like, wait a second, there's this other place that I belong. And, I don't necessarily have to think these ways that society has necessarily, made me to feel. Um, is definitely quite empowering. Um, very much so. Trina, I want to hear from you as well, our New York City representative, because I know that you are a very active advocate as well. And I'm so glad that you're here joining us this evening. So, how did you kind of get your roots in advocacy and all that you're doing?
Well, I got myself involved in advocacy from my experience within the public school system. Once I started sharing it with other people, and then I experienced a lot of discrimination, mostly in high school. Um, One of the classrooms that students with disabilities had classes in was the size of a closet with no windows. We never got the opportunity to go on trips. Our transition plan wasn't the greatest. They didn't help us plan for our future, basically. So that's basically how I got involved in advocacy, and I got the opportunity to um, be a part of the youth advocacy group for the New York State Department of Education. They wanted to hear from youth and students with disabilities, so I was really excited for the first time to have a seat at the table.
Yeah. Wow, you said the classes was like the size of a closet with no windows. That's really horrible. I know, for me, when you learn about some of the some disability history and things of that nature, like for me, it kind of got me a little bit upset, right? Like we're, in the words of um, some disability rights advocates, when shutting down the health, education, and welfare buildings related to the 504 sit-ins, it's like we're not even second-class citizens. We're like third-class citizens at times, and um, you know, this is America where
I kind
we're
of
all
felt invisible
equal,
while I
and
was there.
yeah, yeah. Actually, to that point, because I know that's part of what you, Trina, are really also passionate about, is kind of this making disability visible. Can you share just a little bit about that?
Sure. A little bit about my passion to make disability visible is because um, not only am I a person with a disability and a person of color, but my family comes from a Caribbean background. And in the Caribbean, disability is not visible. They view disability as like a sense of shame and pity. So um, it empowers me even more to make disability visible and for them to see disability as an ability, because so often society wants us to be more, and we don't know how to celebrate our milestones or our accomplishments because we just want to keep on going and doing even more greater things, and we don't realize that we need to celebrate how far we have come as a person with a disability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's, again, I'm just looking at each of you three here on our panel. There isn't not a moment that I would um, feel shameful or pity any of you. I mean, we have. Um, I know we didn't, get to read your whole bios and everything that each of you have done, but I mean, you have Melanie, who's led a disability honor society, and pretty much was the voice for um, State University of New York at Albany's disability community. You got Mika taking over really like the 20 counties of central New York, from the Pennsylvania border all the way up to Canada, empowering young people and doing what she does. And, I know that you're starting the Disability Champion mentoring network as well, Trina. Like, for those of you who are listening right now, there's nothing to be shameful about. I'm sure that each of your abilities, all of your abilities, it's like that saying of like there's a mouse, an elephant, and a monkey, and a fish, and all these other animals, and they have to take a test, and they ask, and they base it on who can climb a tree the best, and the rest of them are supposed to be unintelligent. Like, that's just not the case. So thank you for sharing about that Caribbean part of your identity and kind of how it intersected with your journey. Now, Mika, if you don't mind, are there any other identities, since Katrina kind of brought it up and it also happens to be our next question? Are there any other identities that you're proud of? And do they intersect with your advocacy and pride?
Yeah, quite honestly, it took me a long time to be proud of them, particularly my Hispanicness, my Mexicanness, because there is that, I guess, stigma of that religion piece comes in, which is respectable, but then there's the reality of that doesn't change the fact that in that culture, I should be like seen but not heard. And I also have a couple family members, an aunt and an uncle, who that's very much so how the family operates. And it's not because of anybody's fault. It's just how the culture is. And I was always really curious about that when I was growing up. It kind of bothered me because I don't believe in being seen but not heard. So it still takes me a long time to try and like really figure that piece out. But what I also struggled with was coming to terms with my sexuality. I came out when I was 14 and I really felt alone. I didn't know anybody at the time that was gay other than people on TV, and they weren't even played by people who identified, which we're not going to get into today. But that was something that I struggled with, and I felt really alone. And well, nobody in my inner circle tried to throw the religion card at me. I didn't expect like how much of a ripple effect it would take in my family, just because it was something that my family was accepting of, but then it's different once you know somebody. And I mean, they're still really accepting of me today. And I understand my privilege in having a family who is accepting in every way, shape, and form. And so that is an identity that I hold proud, but I also hold understanding that I have privilege, and I wish that everybody had that opportunity. But I know that it gets really tricky, right? Because there's the intersectionality of my race, and then even my gender, and then my sexual orientation, and it can be a lot all at once. And I felt really alone because growing up, I didn't have the closest thing that I had to a Mexican woman that was a role model to me was Selena. And it sounds so silly, but like I know every single word in that movie and everything about her, but that's the only person that I could identify with in that way. And I often growing up referred to myself as somebody from Girl Interrupted with Angelina Jolie and Winona Ryder, and their experience in the mental health, I guess, psychiatric environment. And so I assumed that that's what I had to look like. It's kind of like, oh, I'm crazy? Well, I'll show you crazy kind of thing. And even the word crazy, right? Like, how stigmatizing and how harmful is that? So I realized, it took me a long time to realize that there's no way to glue them all together. separate identities for a reason. Now, do they intersect with each other? Absolutely. But I can't glue them all together and try and have them make sense. There's different systems, there's different so many things that I just can't, it doesn't make sense. And quite frankly, it's just me chasing my tail all the time. But I found that the more curious I got, the more I would ask questions. The more I assume for some people it might look like pushback, but it was more curiosity because I wanted to understand, how can you do all of this at once? How can you own all of this at once and not feel like it's a total struggle? And so I actually became really proud of understanding myself and understanding my boundaries of, you know what, today is a day that I'm feeling really anxious. So I'm going to listen to my music while I'm working, and I'm going to, you know, just, if you need something, you probably have to like knock on my desk or something like that, because I need this in order to take care of myself today. And maybe we can talk about self-care and everything like that at some other point in time, but I really had to sit with each piece of it and honestly work through some trauma to really understand how they do intersect, and that they'll never be on even playing fields. But I feel like, again, I'm privileged to have a family that's really supportive, but I also don't ever want anybody to feel that loneliness that I ever felt. It's paralyzing. It's completely paralyzing. And I've always been one to kind of stand up in the room and, you know, not be afraid. My goal in life, it might sound cliche again, but is to be unapologetic. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. I don't want to feel put myself in this position where anybody else is pitying me. So, you know, they talk about, are you living or are you existing? Well, I'm certainly living, but I also don't I don't want people to pity me. So therefore, in my eyes, that's being absolutely unapologetic about every part of me, which goes back to the intersectionality.
Yeah. I need to, well, I don't necessarily need to, but I'm going to apologize for saying whoop whoop. For those of you who don't know, I am biracial and half of my identity is Puerto Rican, so I had to whoop whoop for the Hispanicness. So, I mean, we have Trina, who just shared about her Caribbean background. We got Mika with her Mexicanness, if that's a word. You know, myself, who's Black and Puerto Rican, and Melanie.
Yeah.
You want to talk about yourself a little bit?
So-
you know, other identities you're proud of, how how they intersect.
So there's three things that I'm going to touch on first. First of all is my gender. So autism is very often thought of as a boy's disability or a man's disability, which is absolutely not true, but the stereotype is there. So when I meet people and they learn that I'm autistic, they can very often react in shock or disbelief simply because I'm a woman. And another issue with autism and gender is that when it comes to perceived misbehavior or rudeness, autistic women are very often treated much more harshly than men. And a possible reason for that is that people assume that women are inherently better at quote-unquote social skills than men, and retain that assumption even if you're talking about an autistic person, even though it is a wrong assumption. And I very often will avoid autism recreation groups that are run by non-autistic quote-unquote professionals, mostly, if not entirely, for that reason. The second is, so I'm also a member of the queer community. I'm a biromantic asexual. And what that means is that I am romantically attracted to multiple genders, but sexually attracted to no genders. I'm also what they call gray aro, which means that I experience romantic attraction differently from other people. And a lot of this does intersect with my autism because Autistic people experience emotions differently from other people. Romantic attraction is an emotion. I experience it differently. And now I've known that I've been asexual since I was 18. But I was rather freaked out when, at the ripe old age of 25, I discovered romantic attraction to women. But because I already had a great network of disabled mentors, all I needed to do was go to the couple of mentors who were also in the LGBT community and talk about it with them. And that made the realization a lot easier on me. And finally, I would like to talk about being Jewish. So, Jewish culture tends to have a pretty heavy emphasis on study and academics and achievement. And that led to some of my self-esteem issues as a child, where I struggled with academics and achievement, not because I wasn't smart or talented, but because the school and volunteer and work systems weren't set up for people like me. But eventually, in adulthood, when I was able to discover more ways that I could achieve that were suited for me, that issue subsided. There's also the fact that Jewish youth groups tend to have a pretty heavy emphasis on sex and hooking up, which, my being asexual, that caused a lot of problems. And it causes a lot of problems for a lot of asexual Jews. But one thing that I do get out of my Jewish culture that I very much apply to my disability culture and love is that if you look at the list of Jewish holidays, there have been many, 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 many times throughout history where somebody tried to either kill us all or take away our culture, and yet we survived. I think of my favorite holiday, Purim, and its heroine, Queen Esther. And an abridged version of this story, basically, is that Esther had won in a beauty contest the right to marry the king of Persia. But she had to keep her Judaism hidden because if he knew about that, that would put her out of the running. And when the king's advisor convinced him to kill all of the Jews in Persia, and Queen Esther heard about it, she fasted for 3 days, approached the king, which you're not allowed to do even if you're the king's wife, and said that she's Jewish. If you kill all of the Jews, you're going to have to kill me too. And that convinced the king not to kill all of the Jews in the land. But the final thing that I'm going to talk about in terms of intersectionality is something that applies to every religious minority, and something that's very important to bring up in an ADA forum. A lot of people don't know that there is a religious exemption to the Americans with Disabilities Act, meaning that places of worship and religious aligned not-for-profits do not need to follow the Americans with Disabilities Act by law. And this causes a lot of problems for anyone who belongs to a minority religion, whether they're a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu or anyone. No matter what your religion you are, this is going to cause you to have to shop around a lot in order to find a congregation that's accessible to you. But if you're a member of a minority religion, you might have only 1 or 2 options in your town to begin with. And this can so restrict people's abilities to participate in their religious communities the same way a non-disabled person would. But I'm trying to fix that. I helped start an inclusion committee at my synagogue, and I've helped other people start inclusion committees too. Not just other Jews, but Muslims and Christians and Buddhists, all sorts of people. And if you look on the YLAN blog in February, you can read my post detailing how I started my inclusion committee and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for. I mean, I think I've said this quite a bit, but we have such a dynamic panel here with lots of different backgrounds, lots of diversity, and just lots of experience, just speaking up and advocating in their own rights. I just want to pause a moment and remind those that might be viewing that you can please use the chat feature, the comment feature, if you're whatever platform you might be watching on, whether it's Winnell's Disability Pride event, Facebook, Young Leaders and Advocates Network Facebook, or even Winnell's YouTube channel. We will be taking some questions if you have any. So you can enter those in. You could also share where you're coming from or where you're joining in from today. We'd love to know. Or perhaps, what does Pride mean to you as well? We would love to, make this a little bit more interactive. And I know that earlier we had talked about how to get involved. We have different ways that you can get involved. You can become a member, and as a member, you can join some of Young Leaders and Advocates Network's working, statewide committees, including advocacy, engagement, and network events. Also, as a member, you can learn more about joining our leadership council, like these fine panelists have as well. But even if you are not ready for that moment, at least I invite you all to sign up for our listserv, because we also send out information not only about what we're doing, but other opportunities going around statewide for young people with disabilities get involved in, which could include different public comments for different state plans, or perhaps other events that are youth oriented or empowering for young people as well. So I just wanted to pause and mention that. Xavier, thank you for sharing that. This is an awesome event. I'm glad that you are enjoying it. So please, if you are tuning in, please share. We, this will be available afterwards, but even right now, so we have a couple more minutes. We'd love for more people to join in with us. So, and yes, absolutely, Angela. We can talk about how we can get you involved in the next event. Absolutely. That's what we love to hear. Sometimes it's just that first event or first step, to maybe attend an event that really gets you involved in this line of work, like Melanie had mentioned with the statewide youth leadership forum. And one day it changed your complete life. So yeah, thank you. And that is my my dog Mocha. You know how it is doing these things virtually from home. She must have heard, there's some people walking by. So there actually was a reason for her to bark, but she's absolutely adorable. She's a boxer pit bull mix. She's brown, really cute. Maybe someday in the future, you'll see a picture of her. But anyway, let us get back to our panel, which is doing phenomenal job. I know that each of you have kind of shared about different opportunities that you have had to grow as an advocate. Are there any specific ones that come to mind that any of you might want to expand upon? I'll start with Shrina, if there's anything that you want to.
One of the opportunities that I would like to highlight is me becoming Miss Wheelchair New York 2018. In the beginning, things was really quiet, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to make out of my reign. But once I got an opportunity to attend a network event for educators in the New York State Education Department, I met with other people, and I gave them my business card, and one of my friends told them about me, and from there it's like doors just open and opportunities to speak at schools, and speak to young people, or I can't even remember all the things I did, but um, it gave me a greater platform to make a difference. And going back to our previous question, in terms of identity, I often say, um, which one is the issue today? Because I also live in an underserved community and they don't expect much from young people with disabilities. So it's always like, which one am I battling today? But it's everything that I have to battle and try to be a voice for.
Absolutely. I've certainly known that feeling personally, and even when substituting. At one point in my life, I used to substitute for a school district around where I live, and some of the attitudes even within that school of just because a lot of the times I would be substituting in the special education department or a self-contained classroom, and it was horrible. The small, if any, amount of expectations that they held. So thank you, Trina, for being an education advocate. Um, you know, I know that uh, the what's the word I'm looking for? You, the way that you went to school, for lack of better words, your experiences have shaped you. Um, to really try to make sure that no one has to go through that again. That we only progress, that we only get better as we continue on. Um,
I think I don't know if this is the perfect question to share it in, but I think for like youth with disabilities, it's so encouraging to share with them the need to feel worthy, because the moment they enter like the classroom, it's already low expectations, so they're already like discouraged and don't want to try harder or don't want to move forward. So I think it's important to like encourage them to feel worthy within their education, and it will also help them with their self confidence. Because when I was going to school, I struggled with like being confident in my academics, and I think in college I really found my intelligence as a result of that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that need to feel worthy, and once again, that's the joy of the social model and getting yourselves around advocates and peers, like each of you on this panel, to just realize, like, hey, there's this whole community that is um, that's pretty much can be like a family. I know I've found, or I felt that way, that um, it's been a family that uplifts me when I need, um, and we get to remind each other that we are worthy of these things, and whether we actually say it or I just look at you know each of your accolades and all that you have done, it's like, yeah, you know what, I can do these things too. um, yeah, absolutely. Just a quick shout out to Justin. Thank you for joining and thanking us for all that we do. um, Thank you for joining us tonight. um, so I don't know if Melanie or Mika, if there was any other, um, as we come kind of close to our ending time here, any other opportunities that you wanted to share about, that you grew, that helped you to grow as an advocate?
I'd say that my favorite is probably my position as the inaugural student representative on the Post-Secondary Advisory Council for Students with Disabilities to the Board of Regents. And in case you don't know, the Board of Regents is the decision-making body that makes decisions for education across all areas. K through 12 education, higher education, professional credentialing, all of it. And this was a newly formed advisory council to advise the Board of Regents on matters pertaining to college or post-secondary or trade school students with disabilities. I was the first one, and I was amazed at everything that I could accomplish there. Whether it was promoting universal design, where student accommodations are baked into the class structure rather than students having to ask for them, setting up a system where people could transfer from college to college and have their disability service eligibility transfer with them. And this was even the council where I was able to have my first legislation. And your first legislation is a huge milestone for any advocate or somebody with a public policy career. And mine was specifically amending a program called Reader's Aid that provides readers and scribes for blind students and deaf students that hadn't been altered since the 1930s, since it was way overdue. And I was amazed by how much my other council members and how much the Board of Regents valued me as a person, as an advocate, and how much they valued my voice. To the point where when we started organizing rallies to fight for more funding for college and university disability centers, as long as I was a student, I was always the one that they called upon to represent all of the SUNY schools across the state. And it just felt so amazing to rally all of my disabled peers into fighting for something that we so desperately need. And we haven't gotten it yet, but please keep your eyes on this fight because we really do need this money. These centers are severely underfunded, working on outdated technology, are understaffed, and they even very often have to turn students away. So please stay tuned on this one.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us, and congratulations on your first legislation as well. I had no idea, which, I mean, maybe that's not so much a surprise, but you're always up to something. It's always great to hear the next great thing that you're doing, Melanie. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Mika, by chance. If not, that's okay.
I guess what I'll add is that there is so much power in allyship. I know, it's nothing about us without us, but there's something to be said about feeling supported. Understanding that that's not necessarily if it's not necessarily your experience, that it's kind of like this step up, step back, but also, being respectful. But anybody can be an ally. Being a true ally or having true allyship qualities are something that you can't just like flip a switch and it happens kind of thing. You can come at it from various perspectives. My sister has a seizure disorder. I had, it sounds kind of weird, a seizure disorder growing up. And so, there's that obvious personal point of it. But, when I think about the things that my sister had to go through in school and then the things that I had to go through, I think about how different our experiences were, but that doesn't mean that she was alone in it. There were times, and there still are times, where she might not be in the best space in order to advocate for herself, or sometimes she is, but because, even for myself too, because nobody else is talking about it, it's like, ooh, do we talk about it? Do we bring it up? Do we not? Like, what happens here? Now it starts to get awkward. And, we're in a conversation potentially about like tokenism and all this other stuff. But like, I guess I'm saying to people who don't consider themselves as having a disability or whatever you want to call it, that doesn't mean that this doesn't apply to you. it very much so applies to everybody universally. We all know somebody in our lives or have heard of somebody who has a disability, has difficulty navigating it because of systems and all this other unfortunate things. But there is something to be said about allyship. Even going to see a movie and understanding a little bit about what struggles are, or very minor things. And also taking a moment to understand that we're not your personal comedy show. I know that, with stigma and everything, it's really hard because we're so ingrained to like I reference the word crazy. Like, we're so ingrained to be like, oh my God, she's so crazy, or he's so crazy, or whatever kind of thing. But we don't really necessarily understand that until we unpack it. Like, where did the word crazy come from? What does it mean? We've seen the evolvement of certain words that are completely outdated that, people still reference. And that's even a good opportunity right there. If somebody is using a dated term, I will call it, and it makes it, you're like, hey, I don't think that that's cool. Say something. I often, if somebody says an outdated term that I don't like to speak of at all, actually, I always kind of question somebody. I'm like, well, what makes you think that it's that? Is it silly? Is it confusing? Is it just you don't understand? Like, out of all the words in the dictionary, why do you choose to use those words? That is allyship right there. Like, if you can catch yourself, or at least educate yourself and understand, hey, that's really not cool when people say that. You hear things being used interchangeably, like, oh, the weather is so bipolar. No, that is not a comparison. That is not how it works. That is a kind of shaming somebody who's that's their diagnosis. And so an allyship can look like many different things, but I think it's important to understand that every single person, disability or no disability or what have you, in your position, you have the power to help change this stuff. If nothing else, support us. If we need you to just like spread the word, like share on Facebook or Snapchat, anything like that, please do. If you want to support us, things like that help out a lot, because visibility is really important, but also understanding that might not be your experience, so not necessarily your place to speak of, but that doesn't mean that you can't support us and spreading our message, or even be like, hey, that's not cool. I don't like X, Y, and Z. I found that to be really helpful for people within my life that might not understand some of my diagnosis like thoroughly, but if we can, I don't know, watch a TV show and they get like a glimpse of what it might be like, then I appreciate that, because then it makes me feel less alienated and more understood, even though I'll never be understood entirely, but that's okay. It makes me feel supported, and I appreciate when people take the time to do that.
Absolutely. Looking at the time right now, we are just about at the end of our live event. I do want to quickly, just share a couple last things. If you're interested in learning more about disability pride and history, or interested in learning about people, events, and movements that shape the world that we lived in, and becoming a force for change in the disability community, take the time to learn about our history. The National Consortium on Leadership and Disability for Youth, or NCLDY, they served as a national youth-led information training and resource center. They developed a disability history timeline that we use and share often. I'm not going to put in a link now, but we will share these couple of resources on our Facebook, YLAN's Facebook, so you'll be able to access them. We'll also be sharing the National Council on Independent Livings, or NICLS. They had a disability pride toolkit and a resource guide that's available. We'll also be sharing disabilityhistory.org. They have a timeline that dates all the way back to BC time, which is quite far back. And finally, also, Yo Disabled and Proud has a history of the disability rights and independent living movement as well. Once again, we will be sharing those on our Facebook for those of you who are interested, to be able to follow those links and learn a little bit more. Also, you're always invited to join Young Leaders and Advocates Network, or YLAN, for different workshops, presentations, or monthly social gatherings like this, or other panels that we are planning for the future. To stay in the loop of all that's going on and forthcoming, follow us on social media at YLA Network NY, or you can check out our website at www.ylanetwork.org, or cancel that. Let me try this again because words are difficult. www.ylanetworkny.org and sign up for a listserv or become a member today. Also, feel free to reach out to us via email. That's info@ylanetworkny.org. If you have questions about becoming a member, joining our leadership council, if you have questions about different presentations or events that we should host, or perhaps you would like our assistance in supporting one of yours, we also offer technical assistance as well. We just sincerely want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Sincerely want to thank our panel this evening. So I'll give a hand to Melanie Hecker, Mika Gonzalez, and Trina Hazel once again for sharing with us on this evening. And finally, tune in tomorrow to WINL's, or Western New York Independent Living's Disability Pride event page on Facebook, as they conclude this week of exciting events and sharing. So finally, I would like to thank you all once again. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our interpreter as well, and to a couple of people behind the scenes, and to those of you who have told us that we did an awesome job. So thank you, Nell. Thank you, Xavier, Justin, all of you who have joined in. Thank you once again. Shout out to Brianna as well, our director, who's joined us once again. Have a great evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.